Good evening, everyone. Thanks so much for sticking with us this Friday evening, spending this time with us. Such a fantastic film. But I want to jump right in. Just fantastic film, super heavy, super meaningful, super powerful, great acting. It won the U.S. Dramatic Grand Jury Prize at the 2019 Sundance Film Festival. It's the first time a Black female director, which is the first time for a Black female director for Chinonya Chukwu. Um, just awesome film. I want to introduce our first conversation, or the first part of our chat is actually Aldis Hodge, who is Anthony Woods himself.
Hmm.
I think he is here. Let me make sure.
Can you see me? Hello?
Yeah, there you are. Yeah, hey. Um, I'm speechless. Like I watched it in advance, trying to make sure that I wasn't too extra surprised or maybe to take the edge off seeing
Yeah.
it. I was impacted the first time from beginning to end, and this time
Hmm.
was the same, and I didn't expect that. The only reprieve I
Yeah.
got was our brief blackout. I don't know if you were on the call, but
Yeah.
just a powerful, powerful film. And I mean, your acting is. It's funny because I've seen you in several things, and I believe you're every character that I have seen you as. I've called you Noah for the last few years from the underground. I've
Yeah.
called you Brian Banks. And now I don't know if
Oh,
I'll be, I don't think I
thank
want
you.
to call you Anthony because you're here, but, um,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
definitely fantastic body of work you have in the last few
Thank
years.
you. I appreciate that.
2018, Brian Banks.
Hmm.
2019, Clemency, What Men Want. 2020, you've had three. Somehow you managed to pull that out of your hat, even during the coronavirus pandemic. The Invisible Man
Exactly.
was your latest.
Yeah.
Magic Camp, One Night in Miami, which I haven't seen yet, but I'm looking forward to
Yeah,
it.
no, we're in post on one night in Miami, but hopefully that gets out ASAP because talk about having a conversation that's necessary right now. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah. Just thank you for taking the time out to have this conversation with us, and
Oh no, thank y'all.
just awesome. I mean, I'm honestly, I didn't expect to feel so strongly about this film the second time.
You
Usually you
gotta
see
you
it the
gotta take a
second
minute.
time, you're like, oh, I
You
know
know,
what's about to happen, blah 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 blah. You're like, this about to happen. But I think
hey,
the interesting thing about it is your acting or the things that happened to him, which is the first thing I wanted to talk to you about. Your portrayal of Anthony Woods. It weaved us through all these emotions and through this roller coaster. And first you jump in. The first time we meet you, it's the day your mother died, and
yep,
then we see you isolated within the prison, which is its own beast. And we see, hope. We see hope as you're hopeful about your appeal. Then we see the letdown from the denial. You learn about your
yeah,
son, which is hopeful, but then it's your conversation with the ex was like, whoa, where's she going with this? Then they
yeah,
didn't show, and then the finality, your fate with the chaplain, where you finally let everything out.
yeah.
um, I can only agree with RogerEbert.com, who described your portrayal of Anthony Woods as a profoundly beautiful piece of work, and it definitely is that. But I wanted to know, like,
Thank
how
you.
did you prepare for this role? What did you do? Like, how did you get in that space, and how did you get out?
Um, um, I'm lucky that I've been doing this a long enough time to know how to distance myself personally from my roles. You know, I have to in order to keep that mental health going. But as far as this role, started off with just talking to our fabulous filmmaker, director, writer, Tanoya Chukwu. She spoke to me about her perspective on capital punishment, what got her involved initially, and then she told me about Troy Davis, the case of Troy Davis and what happened in the aftermath of his execution in Georgia. Uh, she gave me the book, read the book about him fighting for clemency, people advocating on his behalf, all of these different things. And then from there, I took a trip to San Quentin with one of our producers to go observe the men who well, the men who were on death row and the brothers up there serving life sentences and speaking to the board. I was not permitted to personally speak to the men on death row. They weren't permitted any outside contact. In fact, when they were transferred across the yard, all of the other inmates were made to not look at them or speak to them. They had to turn their backs. So I felt like the treatment was about as desensitized and inhumane as you could get up until their final days. But in speaking to the warden, he told me about the personal interaction that he has with the death row inmates, and even expounded on the fact that he had never in his time seen one inmate on their last day resist, because he said he felt like in the time that they did have and the years that they spent there, they formed a bond of respect, and to a degree adoration, respect amongst men, you know, between the guards, the warden, and the condemned. So just taking that all in helped me figure out what the world for my character Anthony would be, just because he had been in prison for about 15 to 16 years at the time we meet him. And regardless of what he did, you know, Chinoya and I, we spoke about the idea of whether or not he was guilty. And I asked her, she wouldn't tell me. And it's because, you know, it doesn't matter. And that was the point. You know, we wanted to have that conversation with the audience to say, regardless of whether he did or did not do it, that's not the question we're asking. We're asking, we as a society, are we allowed to be complicit in this? You know, the question I take away is, do we as a society have the right to take the lives of those who may have or may not have taken a life? And if, in fact, we believe we do, does that not make us just like them? What's the difference? So, you know, it's just a lot of personal depth. And then also trying to make sure the audience is a human being. That was really the exploration of his story that I wanted to tell. I wanted them to see a man beyond his environment. I didn't want them to see a prisoner first. I wanted them to see a human being and a man and somebody who had dreams and flaws and could be any one of us. So the next time you look at a prisoner, look at them with a bit of a discerning eye in a very curated way.
Right. Wow. Yeah. And to be honest, you're right, because I didn't look at Anthony the prisoner. I looked at Anthony the man. So absolutely. I mean, I didn't at no time. I mean, I wondered, to be honest, like I wanted him to be outraged and I wanted him to say, I didn't do it. I didn't do it. You know, I wanted that. Yeah. And we only got a snippet of that, which is when in the car ride on the radio, we heard all of the evidence that was leaning towards his innocence, not his guilt. Right. So that's the only time that was revealed. So I thought that was interesting, now that you bring it up. So which scenes, I guess, were most difficult for you? Or were they all the same? Were you personally?
This is very strange because of how excited I was about this project and how hopeful I was about the potential of it. None of the scenes hit me emotionally in a way I felt weighted down. The harder it got for Anthony, the more elated I became, because we get to show the audience this is a real slice of life for these people, these men and women who are in these positions. So it sounds quite averse to a degree, but I will say that I had fun with, you know, the scene where he decides to take, you know, his own values into his own life into his own hands and starts banging his head on the wall. Because for me, that was his moment of pride to say, look, if this is going to happen, I'm going out on my own terms. This is the most dignity that I can afford to myself in this particular time. So I thought it was one of his strongest moments. The scene between Danielle Brooks and I, first of all, she's incredible. She's a beast. The thing I love about that scene, I remember reading the script and I wasn't even paying attention to my lines. I was looking at her because she has that raw moment where she has the courage to say the necessary thing, which is the truth, which I feel like most people wouldn't have the bravery to say. When she says, I'm not sorry, you know, whether you agree or disagree, that's not the point. The point is, you know, in that moment, there's a you kind of get it in a different way.
Yeah.
There is no rose-colored glass. There's nothing, and that's what I love about Shanoya's writing, is that she was so raw and direct, but she painted the picture so beautifully and so clearly.
Mm-hmm.
The moment where Queen Alfrey,
Mm-hmm.
is running down protocol for how Anthony is to die. In that moment, I said, well, how do you take it when someone's telling you exactly how you're going to die?
Mm-hmm.
What does that look like to you? That was hope and all of that, dreams, all that flashing before him. And all of those moments of being just emotionally exposed, being vulnerable to the maximum. I wanted to show all of that just in the most minute uh, execution to a degree for him to see all of his value. It was fleeting, but still, that's what somebody goes through.
Yeah.
When they're being told how much their life is worth in that little moment, and I wanted people to see that.
Right, right. Yeah, there was almost a juxtaposition because she was kind of reading it off like a flight attendant, like these are the rules
Yeah.
and put your,
Mm-hmm.
put your life vest on and this is what, and you were kind of
Yeah.
just, but I felt like Anthony was zoning out a little bit, which I think is realistic.
Well, the warden, when I was at San Quentin, I was talking to the warden. He said that when it comes down to it, they usually they ask the inmates how they would prefer to be executed,
Hmm.
and different states have different means, but I believe it was primarily between the electric chair or the needle. And
Hmm.
he asked me how, which one do you think they choose the most? I said, I don't know. He
Hmm.
said, yeah, they don't know either. It's the thing. How do you choose how you're going to die?
Great.
So he talked me through some of that process, which fed a little bit of that experience that you saw on screen. But
Hmm.
it's weird to because listening to him as well, and he's trying to give these men some sense of ease, but at the same time he's doing his job. And I know that for me personally, I don't want to speak for anybody, but for me personally, when it came to Bernadine, I felt like she was just as much a prisoner of her own reality as Anthony was a prisoner of the system.
Definitely, definitely. I think to your point too, one of the times that really stood out to me is when at the execution of the first gentleman, at the beginning of the
Mm-hmm.
film, when she asked him, "Is there anything I can do for you, Mr. Gutierrez or whatever his name was?" And I'm like, what kind of question
What
is
can
that?
you do?
Let
Like
me up,
what you gonna do?
let me up. That's what you can do for me.
Yeah, yeah. But I think that's to a degree
It's a
just
job.
reaching for the last little bit of humanity that you can
Yeah,
presume to give somebody in that situation.
love that, love
But
that.
yeah,
I'm gonna go to. I saw a question on the chat. Sean
definitely
Kyler.
questions.
Yes, lots of questions. Was this a life-changing role for you in terms of roles you would accept from Hollywood? Like, why this role? Was this? I mean, it's such a big.
Mm.
I mean, it's big in so many ways. It's a big issue.
Yeah.
It's a lot of range of. I would imagine a lot of range of emotions in terms of an actor, on personally and on the screen. Like,
Hmm.
was this any different from any other role?
Yeah, definitely different. Life changing is a bit of a broad question in that I think many things are life changing in ways we may not always recognize, but I chose this for obvious reasons that I thought could change my life.
Mm-hmm.
And then it changed my life in different ways that I didn't see up front. The obvious reasons were the fact that this is a subject matter I believed in, and I wanted to be able to, I want to do work that has real merit and
Mm-hmm.
worth. Not every job is going to be as deep or profound in terms of the work I get to do as this, but whenever you get gold like this, you gotta attack it as much as you can, because I want to be a part of a conversation that is an asset to the progression that we really need to see in our current society. So that lent itself to my own personal ambition. Also, as an actor, I always look to stretch myself and go to areas where I haven't ever been. As a just as an actor, just as a professional and as an artist. I'm always trying to stretch and explore my art through my work. This gave me that opportunity in a big way. I got to, the moment I read the script, I automatically knew. And I wasn't familiar with Shanoya or her work prior to reading the script. But as soon as I read it, I said, "Who the heck is this person? Like, where, like, where you, because it was so." The thing is, not one character was wasted, not one line was wasted. Everything was sewn together so seamlessly. I think she did really. She was quite a force to be reckoned with on the page. And in person, she has such an infectious personality. Every day on set, you would think that this would be a heavy set, but she was always bubbly and laughing, and it permeated the set, and that's what kept us going a lot. But I came to this job with purpose and passion, and it definitely changed in that way. On the outset of it, the changes that you don't see are how it affects people and how they carry it and how it sticks with them.
Yeah.
And you can never predict that. Right. But I feel like we did the job that we set out to do. We went above and beyond because it's hitting, especially these days. It's hitting.
Yeah, it's almost like a vicarious trauma. Like you feel like you almost have to be empathetic to every character. Like you're saying, every character is developed so fully. Like nobody's wasted.
Wendell Pierce, fighting for his marriage. Richard Schiff fighting for hope of his job.
Even characters you don't see, the chaplain's wife in his ear saying, "Hey," the governor, like even the people you didn't see were instrumental in what happened in the film. Kind of along those lines. Many, including myself, feel like it's Black folks' responsibility to tell our own stories. And quite a few of your roles have centered on struggle and liberation, especially of Black men. Noah and Underground, Brian Banks and Brian. I keep going to Noah, right? There's a theme here. Brian Banks and Brian Banks, even MC Ren and Straight Outta Compton, the DA and Sitting on a Hill, Anthony and Clemency. I know you just talked a little bit about that, and you said it has been intentional, but have you had the same intentionality with each one of these roles, or like when did it happen? Did you say, you know what, I want my work to mean something and my work to be very substantive?
Oh, long time ago. I've been doing this since I was like 2 years old. First time I got fired from a job, I was 12, and I was fired. I've told this story before, but what happened was I was fired for being too good, and I don't mean that to any degree of conceit. But what I mean is, we shot the pilot, we tested it nationally because they test pilots before they pick them up to see how well they do. So my character, along with two other characters, tested higher in popularity than the lead actor on the show. So they fired us. Right, they fired us so we didn't outshine the lead actor, and that's when in my mind, I'm 12 years old. I'm like, yo, this is what this really is. Like, I thought this was fun, that I'm about to be on TV, but this is it's a business, and I want to enjoy this, so I need to control my narrative for it. And then as you continue to audition, you see where people, at 14, I told my agents I'm not going out for thug roles and basketball player roles at all. Reason being because I've been through all that. And there's nothing wrong with those roles so long as there's a real purpose. But if if those roles only serve to perpetuate a statistic because that's how you see Black people, that's all you see of Black people, there's a problem. And that's what I started feeling. And I wanted to play the people that I admired, the inventors, the doctors, the scientists. Like, that's natural. That's in our community, So it started around there. And I remember even going to an audition, I don't know, somewhere like 12, 13, something like that. And sitting in an audition, articulate, educated, well-spoken, and white man in his 40s telling me, yeah, you're not Black enough. And I'm like,
I love that.
What does that mean?
Right.
Just because I'm well-spoken, guess what? Black people are well-spoken. That's normal for us.
Imagine that.
Don't blame me because you're ignorant of my culture, my community. And don't, so yes, these roles try to be as intentional as possible. Not every role serves the same purpose, so they can't all be put in the same box. When we are telling our stories, whether we're the ones behind the pen, the camera, or behind the production office, we have to have some role and some accountability. I'll work with anybody. I will always try to maintain the narrative, though. If I see something wrong on a set where the dominant voice is not from Black people talking about Black culture, I will go and correct it. And I have to do that all the time and hope that my opinion is respected. If it's not respected, I got to go. Right. But when it comes to us telling our stories, we have been for a long time. And what we as a community have to do is acknowledge and recognize that, because you got to remember, there were the Robert Townsends, the Keenan Ivan Wayans. He put his whole family on. We had, you know, the Fresh Princes, the Martins, the Family Matters. Like we have all that, and it goes, ebbs and flows, right? So we always have it. It's there, but we as a community need to acknowledge it and continue to support it. But also we behind the camera need to continue to produce better and better and more exemplary work as we continue forward with trying to carve out, you know, our sort of position. You know, I don't want to say a seat at the table, because we make our own table. But there is an overwhelming lack of us sitting in executive positions when it comes to executive seats and studio production heads, things like that. So, you know, we're still working our way up there to really have a voice in terms of the narrative on a bigger scale. But we're there, you know, we're telling the stories, we're doing it. And even when you're not the person writing the story or directing the story, if you're the actor, you still have a voice. So use your voice to make sure that your character comes from an honest place.
Right. Love it. Love it. Love it. Cool. Interestingly enough, so we're doing this screening. It's on the heels of the first federal prosecution in many decades last week. In addition to making us think deeply about the death penalty, as we discussed, this film does an outstanding job of elevating the human side of harm caused by the criminal legal system. And there are two sides. There's the system actors, and then there are those who are impacted. The film presents many examples of both of those perspectives and experiences. On the impacted side, of course, we've got Bernadine, the entire prison staff. I mean, it starts off again with Major, I can't remember his name, but he's impacted immediately by the first execution. You know, we saw
prison
that.
Guard, yeah.
And, you know, Major Cartwright, that was his name. The woman's husband, you know, he's impacted indirectly, because he's got to live with this.
He's trying to keep his home together.
You know, right? He's just trying to hold it together. The defense attorney, you know, he's like, this is my last case. I'm out, you know. The victim's families, Anthony's, your family, in terms of your ex-girlfriend and son, who are impacted. And again, and we should circle back, maybe we'll circle back to that later, but the how Black women are represented in this film, I thought was very interesting, from Bernadine to your ex-girlfriend having to make that decision, as many Black women do, many women, period, but especially Black women. We have to make the decision to keep it pushing. We got to raise our kids. We can't, you know, we miss you, but, you know, unfortunately, you know, life has to go on, even with you not in our community. So I want to introduce our other two guests, our two experts. We have a balanced view of two committed experts from the criminal legal system, who each represent one of those sides. We have Aldis Hodge, who is the director of the Reshaping Prosecution Program at the Vera Institute of Justice. For 12 years, she served as an assistant district attorney in DC. As the director of the Prosecution Reform Program, Aldis and her team work with elected prosecutors to end mass incarceration, address racial disparities, and make their offices more accountable to the communities they serve. And we also have Melanie Banks, who's the principal of Melanie Bates Consulting, which is a strategic policy and communications firm with an overall focus on criminal justice reform. She has a strong passion for criminal justice reform and believes that poverty, lack of education, and other social issues should not be the pipeline to prisons, but they do, right, Melanie? Are you ladies there?
We're here. Thank you for having us.
Yes.
Hi. The first question, and I want to bounce this off of both of you, and also Aldis, if you want to answer as well, is often we assume that only those who are incarcerated are impacted or affected by America's level affair with jails and prisons. You know, we only think that the people in jail are the ones who are in fact impacted. Or what are each of your takeaways from the film as it relates to justice reform? Is the first question.
I would say for me, again, Aldis, phenomenal job, excellent work. I really felt it. It was so powerful. And the fact that
Thank
you're
you
so
very much.
mission driven and purpose driven is very inspiring. So kudos to you, the producer, and to Vera Institute of Justice for even holding this session. I think it's critical that people are aware of what's going on. And this was just an excellent and beautiful body of work. And I'm honored to be sitting here with you all this evening. I think the film was great. It was very thoughtful and deliberate about how it portrayed the complex web of emotions that were in play. And it's just a stark reminder of how much more work still needs to be done. For me, I think it was great how the warden humanized the directly impacted persons in the film. She called each resident by their last name. She comforted the mother, Mr. Jimenez, before his execution. She cared whether or not she could afford the funeral. She encouraged the chaplain to try to open up Mr. Woods. She called the attorney to let him know that he tried to commit suicide. So she didn't have to do any of those things. So I really think it was inspiring again to see that she humanized the directly impacted persons. And if this could be effectuated across the system in different places, I think it really would go a long way. So kudos again for raising that there.
And just sort of picking up on where Melanie left off, and also just want to commend Aldis and really everyone involved in the film for the powerful storytelling. But one thing that really resonates with me is the fact that because the warden and really all of the actors are so humanized, what we get to see very clearly is the pain. And so there are no winners here, including the victim's family, and that even after 15 years of time passed, and as in the time we know the movie is set, the pain is still palpable. There doesn't appear to have been any healing or any really repair to what had been done to this family. And so it's just a further reminder that this system is not working, and it's not working for anyone, not just those who are accused and charged and punished in it, but even for those who are carrying out those duties. And I just think it really helps us understand that it's more than just a few bad actors, that with the way we solve this is more diversity in these positions. It's clearly there is something wrong at a much deeper systemic level. And it doesn't matter that the warden was a Black woman who actually cared in a different way. It's still the system she's a part of, and the system still continues to perpetuate this violence. And, just having this be right now in this moment where we have a federal government that just recently started executions again after a 17-year hiatus, where we have all the protests that are happening and the real demands for deep systemic change, having these, powerful stories to really help us see really more closely what these experiences mean and how they impact those who are involved really helps to further the conversation.
Yeah. So what does this, for any of you, either of you, what does this tell us about the criminal legal system's wide-ranging impact on individuals, families, and communities? I think one of the things Aldis pointed out earlier was every character was important. Every character was somehow impacted by the system and the things that, the system that they worked in and that Anthony Woods was a victim of. Or they were all victims in a certain way. And I think you're absolutely right, Jami. It pointed out pain. Just everybody was in pain except for the assistant deputy, the deputy warden. I didn't see him in pain for some odd reason. Certain people I didn't see in pain, so I won't say that. But there were so many people who were in deep pain. What does it tell us about how it impacts individuals, families, and entire communities?
I jump. I'm no expert, but just from personal experience, I know that it completely destabilizes one's home and environment, and particularly their potential for a different kind of future. There is a reason why there's a school to prison pipeline. There's a grooming that goes on. It starts with your environment. I was raised in an environment that told me that I was supposed to be less than. My mother is the one who was like, look, you're going to be all you can be. She was like, don't let these people lie to you. I grew up around family members who were impacted, and I was, like I said, myself impacted with the absence of certain people because of prison. And you got people aside from coupled with the disproportionate measures, the extreme measures when it comes to targeting Black and brown people, brother gets caught up with a dime bag of weed and automatically he's in jail for like 10, 15, 20 years. For what?
Right.
What is the purpose of it? What I want to know is, what is the point? What is the real value in that for you? Because now you have a whole family that's out of place, or displaced rather. So because now you have a mother who's probably not going to be as present in the home because she has to work. There's not going to be help. There's this, there's that. Kids who are trying to figure it out, they get caught up with other influences. We're all familiar with these stories, but my question always comes down to the fact that the powers that be know the problems. We have the conversations, we've been having them for a long time. They know the problems, they know what we've been asking for. We've not been silent about this. Why don't the necessary changes that need to be made, why are they not made? And the only particular answer I can deduce from that is that it doesn't benefit their agenda. Mm-hmm. It is to their benefit that we remain in a state of dismay as a culture, because to a degree, as my brother so put it, they prey on our peace. We try to keep rising, keep getting up, and I believe it is this country's greatest flaw that in order for equality to be met, laws have to be broken. That makes no sense to me. But it feels like the target is always on our backs and people need us to be pushed down in order for them to stay up. And the question is, how do we get out from under that? And this is just me just spitballing, but I grew up in between New York and Jersey. My mama made the best childhood ever, for me and my siblings, but we had some hard times. We lived in our car for a little bit. We dealt with the homelessness, and fights in the streets. We did all that. And only to get to a place where I remember the world constantly reinforcing to me how much I was not. And my mother having to constantly remind me how much I actually was. Only to get to this place now, I'm 33, and I'm like, we still dealing with this. Why? Because it was built this way. Yeah. It wasn't, there's no flaws in the system that was built to perform, that is performing exactly the way it was supposed to perform. You have to dismantle whatever it is, reshape it, and it just takes the right people and the right teams to come to reason, stand to reason, to try to, compromise. And that's what we're missing, that true compromise, which I don't understand. I don't have the answer to that, but.
Yeah, thanks for that.
You sound like an expert to me, Aldis.
Yes, right.
I'm just tired and sick and tired is what it is. I'm sick and tired. Done. I'm
And that's the bad part about how we all have to be these experts. I know we often talk on our teams about how we're not on, we have to work in the work, but then we don't get to clock out, because at the end of the day, we are the work. We're it.
Yeah.
So, yeah, interesting.
Yeah, I just wanted to sort of pick up on that thread that Aldis mentioned. I think that framing, understanding that the system is operating exactly as it intended, is really important, because if we approach reform and the need to change things from that perspective, then we know something is required more than just tinkering or just new training or a few new policies or different people. But if we really understand that, no, we see the disproportionate impact on Black people and Black communities because it is operating as intended, then something very different is required of us in our efforts to change it. It means we have to be radical, we have to be bold, we have to do some real dismantling before we can actually rebuild. And so that, I think, for me, that's what excites me the most about this moment, because what we have seen happen is that only happens due to pressure. It's not going to happen because stakeholders or system actors just on their own say, oh, we need to do the right thing. It comes with pressure. And so in the work I lead, we've seen that as we now have prosecutors who run on platforms of change, who win on decarceration and addressing racial disparities because their communities have demanded something different from that office. And what we're seeing now is not only is that demand in response to the tragic loss of life that we're seeing about holding officers accountable, their defund the police is all about there is a system problem that we need to tear down and take the money back out of that system, put it into the under-resourced systems of education and healthcare and all the things we know will promote community thriving. And so I think we are at this tipping point right now where the demands for change and this real understanding of the centering of Black lives mattering in that change is this opportunity for us to do something drastically different. And so I'm hopeful, that community pressure, that really centering the power in those who've been most impacted is going to lead us to something different.
Love that. Love that. And I guess in terms of people who are most directly impacted, like how, Melanie, I guess through your work, a lot of what you do is elevating the voices of those who are directly impacted. Like how can we do that better? How can we do a better job of that? What are the things you think that would make that happen?
Sure. I think holding sessions like you're doing now, I think always ensuring that we include the voices of the directly impacted population, whether it be the person who's been behind the wall or the loved one or the child in the conversations, they should be part of the reform or the disruption of the system, that conversation from start to finish. I think getting that firsthand knowledge is really essential to moving the ball forward, empowering them to have that platform to share their truth and their personal story. I think a lot of legislatures and local lawmakers who are making these laws that impact these systems haven't been touched. So they need to hear from people who are on the front lines, who have been hurt, the trauma that they experience, what it's like to feel, to be caged like an animal, to be referred to as a number, to not have liberty to move about as you see fit, I think is really powerful. So in order for real change to take place, I think those voices need to be centered at any discussion or any movement for reform or disruption.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
Yes, and yes, and yes, and yes. We got another comment. Also, we have to take the profits out of prisons. Human and corporations preach, Melanie. All right now. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, it's all about money, and I think, as we've all said, the system is operating as it was designed to. So is it really broken? I mean,
you need to go break some.
Yeah, let's break it up. Let's break it up. I'm not opposed.
Yeah.
One of the things, kind of going back to the movie, the film, is, we often talk about, race, so we center race in terms of the system actors. I thought that Bernadine's character showed us a dichotomy that we rarely consider. As a warden, she was a system actor, but she was deeply impacted. And she was, as a former district attorney, did you feel like her character was a fair representation of her role as a Black female warden, Jami?
No, I did, because I do think sometimes, in a movement when there are so many sort of activists and protests who are really, pushing out and calling for the much needed change, that there can be this demonizing of the people who are in these roles. And I think sometimes we forget that, there are many Black people who work as prison guards, as police officers, as prosecutors, like I was, because they're government jobs, they pay well, and many of us take those jobs because we want to do it differently. We take it with the best of intentions at heart. I thought when I became a prosecutor that power should be in the hands of somebody who looked like me, who wouldn't look at the people we charged as just defendants, but as, someone who could be my brother, my uncle, my cousin, my sister, and who would, have a perspective of looking at them differently. But I can tell you, in my experience, similar to Bernadine, you recognize at some point that you are just a cog in the wheel of a broken system, best of intentions aside. And so that, reckoning that we saw her going through really at the moment of Anthony Wood's execution, where she really had to, it was like this breaking and this acceptance of the role she's playing in harming these men over and over, is a journey I've been on myself, and just having to reckon, with the harm I've caused, and that really all of us who participate in the system. I have there's a wonderful leader of a public defender focused organization, Jonathan Rapping, who leads Gideon's Promise, who will say that public defenders aren't off the hook either, that everyone who's been part of, the system and seeing somebody's child treated the way we treat anyone accused and brought into this system, that we're all culpable. So I appreciated that sort of humanity that we saw of her. But again, it to me, it just underscores the point. You can have the best of intentions. It is a fundamentally flawed system that we have to tear down and rebuild.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see. Oh, another question. At one point in the film, the victim's mother says, "Can you understand what all of this kind of thing does to a family?" And there were many illustrations of that. Melanie, I was wondering if you could share with us in your experience how mass incarceration and over-policing has impacted people, families, and what are the things we need to do to improve, I guess, to improve the circumstances or the conditions until we can improve the system.
I think for families, that's hard. I mean, sometimes you hear you're doing time with your loved one. I think if we know people who are experiencing that, continually check on them, find out what they need, be there to listen, drive them to visits if you're able to, give them money, see if they're able to keep money on their loved one's books, and feel whatever gap is created by that absence of their loved one, and just check on them. I think that's all that we can do until there really is meaningful change. I think in regards to over-policing, for me, I'll share, I'm an attorney, I'm a Black woman, I know my rights. When I'm driving and I see a cop behind me, my stomach shakes, I get nervous, I start, trembling. I didn't do anything wrong, I know my rights, but I'm still nervous. I think all of these things have shifted how we carry ourselves in everyday life, and it shouldn't be that way. I saw on social media recently, there was a young boy who was playing basketball in his own yard. He saw a cop car drive by. He hid behind the truck in his driveway. And that just hurt my heart. And I think we just have an obligation as Black people in general, to really talk to the youth, talk to people who may not be aware of what's going on. We have to come together. We have to disrupt this thing. Like Jami said, reconstruct it, because we are in a tough place right now. And it's just heartbreaking to see story after story after story. So again, kudos to Vera for putting this on and trying to get us to a solution.
Yeah, don't get me started on the caps now. Don't get me started.
Well, Aldis, I know that, and on your social media, you're very outspoken about
yes,
your love for police officers. And it stems from a good place. It's not the people, it's what they're doing. Yeah. This is a question for later in the conversation, but what, from you, as a Black man, as the only Black man on this panel right now, like what would you say to young Black men in particular, young Black boys, who are, we all have that same experience that Melanie speaks of, but I think it's different for Black men. I mean, it's of course, there's Sandra Bland, there's Breonna Taylor, there are different instances, but it just feels different when you have a Black son and you gotta,
It's weird because I know a lot of servicemen. Speak to them. An associate of mine was a detective about 10 years, maybe. He reached as high up as he could go, then he left and he went to teach. He's a Black man. Said with the things that he saw and he heard on the inside, he clearly understands that we're targeted differently than the bigger the Blacker, the bigger the target you are, right? So Black men and Black women are specifically targeted in a very different way. And I think I honestly wouldn't know what to say to a young Black man to keep him alive, because you can say, do all the right things, know your rights. In the moment they do all those things and they know their rights, that doesn't stop a police officer with an impressive mentality from aggressing, right? I've been in situations where police officers have been overly aggressive. I was stopped one time, and this may even seem light, but just shows the mentality that they have when they're coming up. I was pulled over. I was in the middle of Georgia now, so I knew I was at a loss, but I pulled over, stopped my car, and then I put my hands out the window. Now, the reason I did that is to show the police officer I'm no threat to you, right? He walked up agitated with an attitude. Oh, come on, you don't have to do that. Like as though I was insulting him. I'm sorry, Philando Castile just got murdered. Yes, I do have to do this. And this is a small instance. I've had other instances with police officers, but I know they are, in my estimation, they are improperly trained in terms of how to deal with civil offenses, right? They misconstrue civil offenses for criminal offenses, how you have to deal with them in two very different ways. And the space of dealing with Eric Garner when he was murdered, you know, he was supposedly selling cigarettes. All right, the most you're supposed to do is issue him a citation and keep it pushing. But as we saw, the cops were the aggressors. And then what's the worst that happens? The cop gets fired on our tax, on our dime. That's not a punishment. So we need to see police officers within their own ranks deal with police officers. That is, for me, the only thing that's going to instill some kind of hope.
Yeah.
As a civilian, to say, oh, you guys recognize and you got it. What I do is I talk to police officers who know there's a problem, but won't do anything about it. So I can't say about good or bad cops. I say there are people who have badges that don't deserve badges because they're not doing their jobs. And there are people who do have badges that mean well, right? Some of them actually call out bad cops and they get reprimanded. They get fired for doing their job. So there's a bigger issue at hand, because there are people who are in the force that want to do well. They get lumped in with the bad image that all these other people are giving them when we see these instances. And what cops, I understand it's a tough job when you take on the job, but what you have to understand is that as civilians, it is not our job to discern whether or not you are a good or a bad officer. That's not our job, especially if we're following protocol. And when we have all these instances, case by case by case, racking up, and it all just is innocent Black men and women. And yes, other ethnicities are killed at different rates, unarmed, innocent. Yes, we know, we've seen the statistics, but when it comes to us, there's a disproportionately higher rate and a different sort of aggression that is applied to us. Again, the reason is why. There has to be something in the training. Psych evals. When the police officer murdered Philando Castile, immediately on the video, we see the police officer screaming his head off. There's something that switched off to let him know, what did I just do? Oh my God. When we see these instances and cops immediately go to turn off their cameras, they don't call 911. They don't do any of this. You know, I just went through this thing called CQB. It's close quarters combat training, right? Militarized training. It's what they teach Green Berets, special forces, all this. The things that we went through, I was like, wow. I started to understand why someone who's a police officer that's only trained for a few months may make these early simple mistakes from being on the job for years, because the training that we went through teaches the mind how to not make those mistakes, how to discern. And when you see groups of people practicing and they're making these constant mistakes because their mind just says, oh, I got to survive, you get it. When they're taught to look for something, they're not taught to look at a human being. They're taught to look at a case-by-case situation, and they're not taught to process what is the difference here, right? And it sort of reinforces cognitive dissonance when dealing with people. When you're around a group of people that deal with it so long, when it's applied to a certain group, primarily us, Black people, your mind starts to say, I'm dealing with a thing, not a person. That's why we see the aggression. That's why you see cops pulling out a pregnant Black woman and tasing her, causing her to lose her child, because the cop is not thinking that he's dealing with a human being. He's thinking he's dealing with an item, a thing, right? The cops need to be reprogrammed. And we also need to have people in different positions responding to different issues. Domestic violence disturbance, yes, I get it, but like if it's somebody on drugs acting crazy, send somebody who's like in the mental health department, right? You know, send that person. Don't send a bunch of cops running up on them with a bunch of guns. Okay, we don't need to see that anymore. If you're not qualified to do the job or handle the situation, put somebody in play who is qualified. You know, so it's hard when it comes to cops, because I know there's a lot of good ones out there who get a bad rap. But the thing is, I'm sorry, it's not my job to clear up that rap. I'm a civilian. You a cop. Yeah. Go ahead, get your people. If y'all are tired of hearing that, oh, we're getting a bad rap, do something about it, because we're tired of having to say it. We're tired of seeing this. It's to a point where it's normalized that we see these videos, and now it's almost like we're having a bit of detachment, because it's normal to see this brutality. almost as normalized as it probably was for our forefathers to see people hanging from trees back in the 1800s. They had to learn how to cope with it by normalizing it, and we're tired of normalizing it. I'm sorry, I digress.
Oh, you're absolutely right. Snaps for that. That's yeah, absolutely. I mean, and what happened to the days when we could hold police officers to a higher standard? What happened to that idea? Like we can't even. We almost have to hold them to a lower standard.
We
Terrible.
try to, but these days we have to march on in for weeks and burn down buildings, for somebody to do their job, which makes no sense. In the case of Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, and George Floyd, which all happened in such close proximity, if swift action was taken immediately, you would not have seen one protest. You probably would not have seen one peep. If the police precincts that were investigating said, you know what, immediately, this is wrong. This is not protocol. It's not what we do. We clearly know what look, jail, jail, jail. Boom. We'll figure out what the charges are. But look, we're going to handle it.
Yeah.
Civilians, community, we got this. We're going to handle this. But when you get people to try it and they say, oh, well, we need to see more evidence. How much more evidence you need to see, bruh? The whole world saw it.
Yeah.
You get it. Again, I know it's not black and white, but the more you convince us that your eyes are open, the way our eyes are open, we don't feel pressure to have to do the job that you're not doing. Right. It's that simple. I mean, I could be wrong. Johnny, jump in, help me out. I only ask that because I know you have a more, you have a much more mature view because you understand the inner workings. You actually were in ADA. I only play in ADA, so I talk to ADAs. I do research. I look at the statistics. You know what I'm saying? I try to do's and does my job. But I know real life experience. So again, this is me just speaking as a frustrated civilian. We can only know as much as we try to learn, but even then there's some things that are kept away from us, So I'm just trying to figure out what makes common sense.
Yeah. But out of some of the things you just said are exactly the common sense solutions we need, right? There's no reason why we should send men with guns into situations when we know the issue is a mental health issue, when we know the issue is a substance use issue, when we know that this is a poverty-based crime. Why are we sending men with guns? So, like that is a very common sense thing that we need to address. We're seeing it happen in a couple of jurisdictions, but we need to see it happen much more widespread. And I think I just want to emphasize the point again about how much our history ties to this, because you talk about the bigger, the blacker you are, the more dangerous you're perceived, the lack of humanity, the dehumanization that's sort of attached to Black skin, the dangerousness that's attached to Black skin. All of that is directly linked to our legacy of slavery, to the white supremacy that has existed and still exists and is the dominant culture in our country. And so until we step back and actually acknowledge, we've never in our country had a process of truly reckoning with our past. We tried to erase it. And so then we wonder why those mentalities persist. Why do the police, whose origins were slave patrols, still operate in a manner where Black people are not seen as people, and where there's a presumption of dangerous that attaches. So part of this is we have to actually learn our history so that we can stop repeating it and recognize that there's a deeper cause to these issues that we continue to see play over and over. And then the second piece is then we create more common sense solutions, that we do something different than what we have continued to do, which is just more training or different people, but that we have some fundamentally different responses, and not just to the low level stuff. I want to name, we need different responses to violent crime. Our victims are not centered in our responses. They are a piece of evidence used to get a conviction in our current system. It is not about what they need for healing or repair. And so even in our violent crime cases, we need to really look into restorative practices and things that actually promote accountability, because our current system does not. So there's just a lot of work. But I don't think when you sit back and look at it, it feels very common sense, then why are we doing things this way? And so, again, I just think this is our moment, like this is our time. The world is paying attention. So this is the time where we lean in and require it of our leaders.
Yeah, we have a big job to do, because speaking to your point, Jami, the automatic retort to that is it's slavery. Get over it. Come on, guys. It's like hundreds of
I
years
didn't
ago.
do it. It
Come
wasn't
on.
me.
It's like, I'm not saying you created it. I'm saying don't live in the benefits of it ignorantly.
Yeah.
And don't continue to perpetuate the same mistakes.
Yeah.
As you were saying, Jamie, yes, policing started as capturing freed Black people on the promise that they did something wrong. Why? Because we were currency. Black people were currency. As soon as we got free, how are we going to get our free labor? Well, let's make something up. All right, we're gonna catch you. You ain't got your papers. I'm gonna catch you. So policing started off as catching people, saying slave catching, right? And I feel like where we are and why the numbers are the way they are when it comes to the prison system, this is just my personal feeling, is that we have seen enslavement grow to what is now deemed to be culturally appropriate, because you still have indentured servitude being practiced within prison systems today. What is the difference? We feel like there's a label of justice on it. So we feel like, okay, I can sleep at night because you did something wrong, so you deserve to be treated like this, but what does one thing have to do with the other? And if I'm complicit in this, just like with my vote and my tax dollars that may go towards a policy concerning capital punishment, if I'm complicit in this, but I don't have to deal with it, I don't feel anything. But what we have to do as a community is realize we all have a part to play in this, and right now for the Black community, we're seeing that we have to truly educate ourselves and have our ducks in a row when it comes to our history and understanding our facts, because even though these days facts seem to be refuted more and more, we still have that on our side. I mean, it's not a mistake that Black women are the most educated demographic in this country. Why? Because Black women probably have to deal with insurmountable amounts of stress and trauma that no other particular group has to deal with, and then right after that, you got Black kids and you got Black men, like we all in it in our own ways. But we have to maintain our education as a point of survival. That's how we get by. That's why we are the way we are. It's what we use to survive. But even with that, with the facts, those facts keep getting twisted and twisted and twisted. And we just got to keep twisting them back and figuring out how to, I don't believe we should have to assimilate in any way, but I believe we have to figure out how to have the conversation where it's irrefutable. But people like to keep running away from the conversation so they don't have to feel guilty about not doing something about it every time it's brought up. Black lives matter, all lives matter. We didn't say all lives didn't matter. We just said that your lives have always mattered at the expense of our lives not mattering. That's what it means. For a lot of people who say Black lives matter, we get it. So we're just trying to let you know, hey, I'm here too. Yeah. We here, we matter. It's that simple. But people don't know because they don't live in the skin, so they don't understand the idea of what true racism is when you're not walking around with this and feeling it every single day. Sorry, I grew up with the KKK, so a lot to say on it.
Yeah, Aldis. Gee, mic drop, all the mic.
I'm gonna be back here for the rest of.
No, you mic dropping left and right. We don't even have no more mics. We just.
I'm trying to keep up with these two right here.
Yes, and it's 9 p.m. It's 9:03 p.m. You guys, and this has been such a fantastic conversation. I mean, thank you, Al. I mean, thank you.
Yes, this has been great.
Seriously, thank you so much for not only joining us, showing up, but really showing up. I didn't expect it. I don't know. Did you ladies expect him to really show up, or you thought we was going to get?
This was amazing. I was sitting back like this, Aldis. Like this is amazing.
I appreciate you. But look, I know that I'm speaking from a point of passion, right? It's not. I know there's a responsibility that goes with what I say and how I say it. But I'm gonna just be human for a minute, keep it all the way 100. But when I realized who owned the panel, I'm like, all right, we love it. Because the thing is, I'm gonna say what I want to say because I know who's here to educate me. If I get something wrong, one of y'all got me, and you're gonna be like, "Hey, my man, what about that?" I want to be educated, and that's something that we have to embrace as a community, is to educate one another. You know, sometimes people feel like, "Oh, you trying to make me look stupid," or "You trying to make..." Nah, bro, I'm just trying to help you get through. But like, I know one of y'all three gonna get me. You know what I'm saying? So educate me.
So super powerful. I really, really appreciate all three of you. And, you know, again, I thought Aldis was just going to come up here and, yeah, I'm an actor and I'm cool and I'm going to sit here. But yeah, what? Let me answer your little questions, right? I threw away the questions 20 minutes ago. I was like, anyway, you know. But I really appreciate all of you. One of the things I wanted to point out, I wanted to mention that neonrated.com films is has been generous enough to allow audiences to watch the film for free. And I'm sharing right now the link because I know that I'll take responsibility for it. My stream was kind of wonky, but I just sent everyone a link in case you want to watch it again. We are supposed to show it again in a few moments, but I might just share this link because I don't see anyone new who's joined the chat. Let me look. I'm not sure. Maybe I'll start it just to start it. But thanks so much. Cool. Does anyone have any final thoughts or any last minute? This is what we need to do to make America really great again, or make America great in the first place.
You gotta make it great in the first place.
Right. Exactly. I'll tell you one thing: don't vote for Kanye. Don't vote for Donald Trump. Two things I know, right?
Nah.
But vote.
Yeah. You know what? I say it like this. We are so powerful and influential and strong as a community. We done been here before. We survived before. And we're going to get here again. We're going to survive again. But for everybody who's going through it, just keep hope and keep faith and understand that you are the change you need to see. You are the strength that you are looking for, because this is what we do. We're bred for this. We're built for this. We're it's in our DNA to get through these times. So don't ever lose hope. And if you do lose hope, remember, look in that mirror. You are the hope. So just keep it pushing, because look, been here in the 90s with the LA riots and the 60s with the civil rights movement. This is our civil rights movement. So we got work to do. Let's strap up, do some work.
Yes. That's the perfect word to end on. We all got work to do and we need to get involved. I think that's the word.
Great. Thanks,
Absolutely.
everyone. I really appreciate everyone. Thanks so much. Thank you, Aldis, for taking time out of your busy Hollywood schedule.
Thank you so much. No, I appreciate you. You did a fantastic job. Thank you for hosting this. I really appreciate that. Thank you. And thank you, ladies. Lovely to meet you, and I appreciate the knowledge.
Thank you, Aldis. Kudos